So what do we do? It's all good in theory, and I'm a firm believer in understanding the physiology and the biochem in terms of our intervention, but also we want to know what to do with the diet. So things that we do need to look at, and as I said, working and starting with the typical sort of low-fat diet, high fibre, and when then that doesn't work, does the energy balance equation apply for this group? Do they need 1,600 calories if their muscle is not burning their fuel as efficiently? And do they need as much carbohydrate as perhaps we would traditionally recommend in someone who doesn't have insulin resistance? That any exercise is good, because I'll argue later that some can actually do more damage than good. That they'll lose weight as you would expect, half to a kilo a week. That doesn't happen. Should they have low fat? Is a moderate fat intake better to improve the inflammatory markers? That they should do more and more exercise. Again, I can argue against that in certain points. That there's no role for low carb diets, because perhaps there is at certain times when we're teaching this muscle to burn glucose efficiently again. That we can diagnose insulin resistance on a fasting, because I would say 1 in 10 have got a high fasting insulin compared to the 9 who actually only peak on a GTT. And only the very big ones can have it. As I said, you can see it in the smaller people if particularly they've been big exercisers, even though they may have a very strong genetic predisposition. So what are our diet options? Can we eliminate them? That's a good question I ask students. You know, if they're not processing their glucose well, why don't we just get rid of them? Because if the body doesn't have to burn glucose, well, you know, they'll lose weight. This goes back to our basic understanding of fat metabolism, because, of course, on the surface, and this is what has happened with the clients when they go and do a low-carb diet. So we eliminate the glucose and they go on to their omelette for breakfast or their shake and their tuna salad and their nuts, and they lose, you know, 5, 10, 20 kilos. And then what happens, of course, is unless that person eats that way for the rest of their life, so they're not running on glucose as their prime fuel, basically the insulin resistance is still there. And as soon as they reintroduce it, the body's almost forgotten how to process it. So they may be running on ketosis for a period of time, which will enable them, if they're compliant, to get that significant amount of weight off. But then, once they put the carbohydrate back in, which happens inevitably because most people want to eat some level of carbohydrate in their diet, remember we need some carb available to burn fat. You know, year 2 uni biochem, it's the basic cycle. So this is what happens when they've gone on these low-carb diets, they've lost all this weight, and then all of a sudden nothing happens. So they may lose 20, but they've got another 20 to lose. And as soon as they put carbs back in, they gain weight really quickly, because it's like the cell has had starvation mode, so it just stores everything that's available. And then when they're not eating any carbohydrate, they're actually not optimizing fat metabolism, and their ability to burn fat declines over time. And that's the situation, unfortunately, that we get a lot of those in. And it's, I guess, in practical sense, a good thing to know when you have clients who are exercising fasted and they haven't had carbohydrate since 3 in the afternoon the day before, and they're going running onto boot camp without any carb, and pointing out to them that this is why they're not losing weight, because they need a small amount of carbohydrate, probably a lot less than you would traditionally have, but they need a lot less because the cell is not working, but they need some to start to access the TCA cycle, which, go back to your biochem, you remember we need to have glucose available to